Good morning, Dan. Dan Aberhart from Aberhart AG Solutions and Growing the Future podcast. My favorite content creator that makes stuff that I don't understand but love to watch. How you doing?
Oh man, I'm blushing. I'm blushing right now. Isn't it great if somebody's talking? It's like I have no idea what they're talking about, but it's actually really cool, and I want to order it. Where's the order button?
You know, lots of people ordered the shake weight. We didn't quite understand it, but they ordered it. No,
I
you
should have a
you
little button there because this could work for your garden and your lawn. What I
it
do.
could. It could. You know what? You've got the thing is you make stuff that I mean, first of all, we've known each other a lot of years from behind the chair.
Right.
Um, you have probably one of the most positive outlooks on life of people that I know, and it's funny when you leave because people overhear our conversations, like Jesus, what the hell are you guys talking about? Oh, you know what, man? Dan to me is like you're like my Matthew McConaughey of calm life lessons, and we seem to share those back and forth, which is pretty cool because I mean you've had this. You've had your ups and downs through life as we all have, but I mean you are quite possibly one of the most positive people that I know, and really inspirational in the way you do your work. You know, I mean
Well, you know
it's
what? That means a lot to me. And it was really, I was thinking about coming on the show and thinking about where I'm at right now. I was like, this is going to be crazy because I usually share so much with Quentin. We get so personal and automatically feel so natural. I just sit down and I just start to, if you will, like vomit everything. And and it's interesting that you say that because I think, on one hand, yes, I am that positive person, but I've also come to understand at 45 why it's required for me to cultivate that. Because let's face it, on the spectrum, we all have some degree of darkness. We all have our own battles. We all, have to make our way through the gauntlet of life, if you will. And so I've really cultivated these tools that have helped me perform on a level that's really important to me. And I guess my overarching goal with a lot of my endeavors here is freedom of time, money, purpose, and relationship. And entrepreneurship's one of those vehicles that you'd be hard pressed to find something that be comparative, maybe really competitive sports, mastering really competitive sports, or mastering music, maybe, or arts at a really high level, um, or war, battle. Soldiers coming back from war. Often, entrepreneurship's the one thing that can simulate those highs and lows of battle to keep them engaged without sitting on the couch with PTSD jumping when somebody starts a lawnmower and thinking you're back in Iraq.
well, I mean when it comes to you talk about entrepreneurship and I've known you almost the whole time I've known you, you've been an entrepreneur. And you're right. There's highs and there's lows. There's times when a person wants to just say, piss on it. I'm done. I'm done. I'm just going to collect a paycheck and cruise through life. And then there's always that regret of why am I doing this? Why did I throw in the towel? I mean, you've never done that. You've always found a way, and you found a new exit ramp where you say, you know what, okay, this road's not right. Boom, we're going this way. And then when you're on that road, you focus. You're like an F1 driver. You just go and you 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 go, which is really cool because some people get disillusioned. Like I've been there. I've had a business. I had it. I loved it. I sold it. I regretted selling it. But I moved forward. I kept doing what I'm doing, and I think I'm in another path of entrepreneurship with the other end of my life. But I think when you pave your own way, you find your own. You can sort of cut your own path. You can cut through the bush and make it your own, and you've done that. I mean, when I talk about your content that I see with your company, one, I don't understand anything about what you do, although I grew up on a farm. But when I see what you're putting out there, it's so engaging. I'm like, I've had my wife looking at this. I'm like, look at this stuff. And she's like,
Yeah.
what the hell is he talking about? I don't know. I don't know what he's talking about. It's a language that I don't speak. But you're if you can make it interesting to a guy like me who doesn't get it, surely the people that you're targeting are getting it, and they're like, okay, this guy's actually talking to me. This guy's putting something out that's not just a presentation that's canned, that we see so much of that is incredibly boring. No, you're what you're doing is super interesting to a guy that doesn't understand it. And for anybody who's listening, what the hell is Aberhart AG? What is it that you do? I know that you're definitely all for the
Yeah.
farmers. I know what you were doing, but I don't think that's the same thing as where you're at now. Explain this, because I
Yeah.
don't get it.
Well, I'll circle back to that. But the first thing I want to say, I am really proud of you because of the work that you're doing. And I think it was yesterday that I saw you. You were making a video, talking into the camera as though you were talking to me, very authentic in the moment, selling me on the virtues of this home. I'm actually, considering a home and looking at something like that. And it's really interesting to me when you said, this is a great place to make memories. And I'll tell you why. I was like, this guy gets it, because we all have this little device in our pocket with a red button that we've already paid for, that we
Yeah,
check 185 times a day,
yeah,
that we can't really get off of. And that's where everybody is, right or wrong. Ask me
yeah.
about VR later, because I have a hypothesis about where that's all going. But whatever your given speciality is, whatever your God-given talent is, whatever your business is, whatever you are specializing in, because let's face it, nobody in life is a generalist anymore. We don't
No,
get up and generalize about living. Like, we don't cook and clean and fix and create, and we're very narrow specialists in this day and age. And we all have the opportunity to reach each other through this value proposition in a very simple way. And so few people use it, especially as you start to get into. I see people dropping off in their professions, especially when you get into like insurance and real estate, and maybe you're into dentistry or whatever. But
hmm
the fear of professionally stepping on a landmine or something. I don't know what it is, but it's like you could reach your audience with a value message every single day, like Gary Vaynerchuk, jab jab hook. Like, a lot of what we do in our business, we're an agribusiness. I'll talk about that a little bit more. But the way that I see it is, I want to earn your attention, and I want you to get to know and like me and trust me in my chosen vocation in such a way that maybe you're not going to actually order something online. I mean, you got to be fairly inebriated to actually like get sucked into an infomercial where you actually order something and it shows up and it's like, this is the
I could
greatest
tell.
invention ever.
I'll tell you about the first thing I ordered from an
You have to start
infomercial,
there.
and it
What
never
was
worked.
it?
I bought the speed reading course. It was my first purchase on a credit card via phone way back when, and I never used it. I lent it to somebody and never got it back,
Oh,
and I never used the course, and it was like $300 back in. Ooh, I would have been maybe 18, 19. What a waste of money.
what did
Like,
you order?
but
Sorry, I missed that. You were breaking up.
it was a speed reading course.
Oh, wait a minute. You tell me that didn't work?
No, it would have worked had I used it, but it was a big course. I'm like, what the hell? It's gonna take me forever to read this.
Dude, I'm getting obsessed right now with the 80/20 rule. And one of the things they talked about was how to read a book using the 80/20 rule. And essentially, you read the conclusion, you read the introduction, you read the conclusion again, and then you skim for the parts that you're most interested in or have the most value. And really, I mean, Ty Lopez talked about that, with the guy with all the books in the garage and the Lamborghini and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I kind of dismissed it, but I think that's the way. But that's the key. It's really funny because on the podcast on Friday, I had the president of Corteva, 22,000 employee company worldwide. He's managing 600 employees here in Canada. Guess what he does? He reads a book a week. So when they say like CEOs read 60 books a year,
hmm
they're not exaggerating. And that really inspired me. And I started taking notes too. I'm like, screw this. I've been reading like 10 pages a day, as you know, for a long time.
Yeah.
But it's like, this is an area of my game that I've got to up, because you think about a book, they're a person's talking about the things they most want to talk about in the entirety of their life. They're putting all their life energy, all their wisdom into it. And you can read that sucker. I mean, 7 hours a week he's dedicated to reading a book a week. And I think that fundamentally changes who you are in such a positive trajectory that it's hard to quantify.
I think that it's a lot like listening. It's a lot like having conversations, because when you're talking to somebody, you're absorbing their knowledge just like you would if you're reading their words out of a book. And I'm addicted to conversation, which is where this podcast was born from, because the lockdown almost killed me as far as talking to people and bullshitting with them the way I normally do. Um, and I think that reading someone's words, it's the same thing. I mean, I can't read fiction if you put a gun to my head. I can't. There's nothing about, if I want a
Mm,
story, I'll watch a movie. But I read a lot of self help stuff. I think one of my favorite books, and I guess it has to do with personality too. Um, I don't know if you've read it. It's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and it is
yes.
an amazing read. And I've probably lent that book out a
Mm,
dozen times to clients. But the outlook
right.
that you have after that is, it's I like his outlook in that, you know what, we lie to people by making excuses for things when we really don't need to. Why do we do that? Like if you said, "Hey, Quentin, you want to come over for a drink tonight?" and I said, "No," I don't need to make up some reason as to why. It could just be I don't want to. I'm gonna sit in my pajamas and watch a movie. We tend to dance around the truth, and even when you're saying no to anything, we make up a reason for it. Like, I know that I
We're
recently bought.
Canadian.
We're Canadian, but
This is
you
part
know
of the
what?
problem.
But
Too
not too long
Canadian.
ago, we are Canadian. But the funny thing is, like, I bought a car for Kelsey, and I was looking at two different ones from two different clients who happen to sell vehicles, and we chose one over the other. And I called him up. I said, "Hey, you know what? I just want you to know we bought this one. It had nothing to do with you. It had nothing to do with your dealership. This
Always
vehicle,
apologizing it.
no." But I said, and it wasn't even apologizing. I said, "You know what? You did your job great. But we chose this car because of X, Y, and Z." And he's like, "You know what? I wish more people would call me and tell me when they'd make another decision instead of
Right.
just avoiding my calls."
Right.
I said, "And why not? Why not? Like we dance around stuff way too much." And I think that we can
Well,
take
an
advice from these.
interesting example of that is alcohol, because when
Mhm,
you go on 75 hard, you can't drink, and you start to realize how endemic uh, drinking and eating is in our culture and society. And hey, I appreciate it. I'm in sales. Food and drink is literally communion.
mhm,
We were on the road the other day. I can't really say where because
mhm.
it's illegal, but we were out shaking hands and kissing babies. It's like,
You crossed into the other side.
I never
Jesus.
thought I'd be breaking the law at middle age, like in such a fashion that would literally make me like some sort of I don't know. Like I'd have to go to the
Eh,
Underground Railroad if people actually knew what I've been doing to keep my business afloat. But you in businesses that have been shut down can share some of the freedom fighter aspect. But yeah, we were out. I can't even remember where I was going with this, but I'm sure it'll come to me. We were out shaking hands and kissing babies, and like there is nothing like being out in person. But it's funny because I'm off 75 hard right now. So if anybody out there is listening and doesn't know what 75 hard is, it's something that I've done. I completed once. It's a
mhm.
75-day mental toughness program. I failed it about 6 times. But on this program, you got to do five simple but not easy things. And one of them is stick to a diet and not drink. And so where I'm going with this is it's crazy. You kind of know it before, but when you actually go into the matrix when it comes to like absolving not to drink alcohol, you've got to say no. And the first time that I did 75 hard, I was nominated to go over on a business exchange program to Ireland, to go to this to go to this outdoor show where there's 300,000 Irish drinking hard, right? And then we toured a couple of different factories and stuff like that. And then I ended up in Dublin for a couple of days by myself, right? I was actually joined at one point by a lovely German girl who was doing journalism in Switzerland, but that's another story that I shall not tell on the
Yeah.
podcast. But
Yeah.
yeah, so you're traveling around Dublin, and I went down to the the Liberty section of Dublin, which historically has some of the best whiskey on planet Earth, and of course we got the Guinness storehouse and everything. I ended up going to this one distillery in particular that was associated with this distributor that or this manufacturer that we're looking at distributing for. just an incredible place. This place has had three different churches on there from a history going back to like 1,000 years ago. And on this 2 acres, there's over 100,000 Irish souls buried. It's the only distillery in the world inside of a church. And this latest iteration of the church had gone into disrepair because a lightning had struck the steeple and the stones of the church had, blown up or whatever. They had some of the blown up rocks from the lightning storm, and it had gone into disrepair because of the Irish English schism, which I got to know a little bit more about being in Ireland. But I guess the Irish went quite atheist at one point, and this church essentially wasn't getting used for marriage or funerals or anything, and they turned it into old like lighting warehouse or something like that. So, anyways, this guy who had made a lot of money in agricultural business, originally from Ireland, he had circled back, rebooted this church, taken off the roof, lowered these copper, distilling things down into this church, and they made some really fine whiskey there. And I'm telling you, the anxiety that I had, I'm getting to my point, the anxiety that I had about not drinking and going to this distillery was visceral. And it was really interesting to me because I had to fight through this. And it's like, it's such a little thing to be able to say no and not put that shit in your mouth. And it literally came down to, are you man enough or woman enough or whatever, I don't want to be sexist in this day and age saying, but do you have enough self-esteem and self-worth and sort of responsibility to take care of oneself to be able to say no? And furthermore, why is it that you have to justify saying, I got to my point. This is amazing because I took quite a tangent there. I almost
No, it's
lost my
fine.
train of thought. But why is it so hard to say no? And why do you have to explain yourself? Why can't you just say no, thank you, and not do that shot? And I did. I went to that place twice, and twice I said no, thank you, and I handed it to the person next to me. And most of the time, it leads to like a cool conversation about why you're doing what you're doing or why. But who knows, that person beside you might not know whether you're an alcoholic or you're allergic or you're whatever, if it's your faith or something like that. But the fact is, what I found out too is we think we think so much about what others think about us. And
Hmm.
you know what the reality is, what other people think about us? Fuck all. They don't think about you for longer than the 10 seconds it takes for them to think about how what you're doing relates to their survival. So, like, not to offend anybody, but let's be
No.
realistic. If you're looking at somebody else on social media, or if somebody else does something in the room, let's be real. You process that in terms of, like, how does this affect me, my life? And if it doesn't really affect your survival, I mean, you get over it pretty quick. And the fact is, despite what we think, and it is hard with alcohol because everybody kind of wants you to drink with them, but I found, go out, drink some Heineken Zero, you say no, you don't have to justify it, and people don't really care what you're doing for the most part. But that's a great point, and central to the theme of that book, which is a very stoic approach. Um, we can just say no, and it's okay.
Well, I think the problem is there's twofold there. You're in Ireland, and I think that the legal drinking age there is 12. So I mean, it's ingrained into their culture. I mean, it's like going to Jamaica and not smoking pot. It's just part of it. Why do we have to explain ourselves? I don't know. I have to explain to people why I get up early in the morning and go to the gym every day. It doesn't make any sense. I do believe that it comes from a bit of insecurity on the person that's seeing you do it and a tinge of jealousy that you have the wherewithal to do it. And the drinking thing, I don't know.
Agreed.
I'm not a big drinker. Like when I'm barbecuing, usually I'll pour myself a whiskey. It's usually once a week, maybe. It's I was never a big drinker to begin with, though. Now, when someone says I don't drink, there's that that idea that people have in their head that, oh, you must have had a drinking problem at one time, so you don't drink now. When I tell people I really don't drink much, adding much to it eliminates all the questions in the world. Like, yeah, I don't really drink much.
Mm.
But if you say I don't drink, now you have to explain that
I
shit to somebody.
know.
It's like I don't drink. It's like anything. I could say I don't eat Brussels sprouts. No one's going to ask you why. But somehow you're right. Booze is one of those things that people get on, and it's like, and I tell people, you know what? If I drink, let's say you came over, we sat in my garage, and we killed a bottle. Well, the problem that I have with that isn't the fact that I drank. The problem that I have with that is because I am so regimented with my workouts and my physical well-being. I know that that night of drinking has just erased 1 week of work from my body. My body will take a week to recover from that pollution. So it's like what? Well, it's like why don't you eat sugar? Well, if you say I
It's
don't
so
eat sugar,
toxic. It's so
it's
toxic,
toxic. But you don't have
and
to
I love it,
explain to
but
people
it's
why.
very
Yeah,
toxic.
yeah. You don't have to explain to somebody why you don't eat sugar. You just say, yeah, I don't really eat a lot of sugar. Okay, but yeah, booze. You're fine. That is
You
funny how
probably
booze
do
is.
though. Like most people don't get it, and there's that spectrum. Like you end up with everything that I've done, and I mean I'm obviously not the only one, but let's face it, it's a relatively small portion of the population. Let's go back to the 80-20 rule. It's probably 20% of the population. This is probably so true. It's scary. There's probably
Mhm.
20% of the population that's doing like 80% of physically taking care of themselves. In fact, there's a quote in here that talks about how there's 20% of the diseased people, God bless them, that are
Mhm.
taking up 80% of the medical resources. And there's probably a conversation in there around COVID. But to
Yeah.
this whole conversation, you know, I'm very passionate about this, and I'm sure we'll get to fertilizer at some point because that's
Yeah.
interesting
Sure.
too. But what drives me kind of crazy is um, the lack of focus on health. And if our provincial and federal authorities were living such a life that it was an example to all of us, that it behoove us to emulate their behavior because they're so fit and took such good care of themselves. And just Google images for
Yeah.
health ministers provincially, federally, globally, and ask
Yeah.
yourself if you want to like emulate how they look, because how you appear in the mirror, especially naked, is exactly how hard you've been working, right? And so it's really weird when you end up on the spectrum over here. To be fair, okay, I was sedentary. I smoked a pack of cigarettes a day. I've drank fairly hard in my life for various reasons, with others and alone.
Hmm.
And a very work oriented, not a lot of time for outdoors or, you know, a lot of healthy things that now I'm very keyed in on for a long time. I didn't go to the gym till I was 40. I've been, 30, 40 pounds heavier than I am now for a long time. But it's really interesting starting to do this program where a lot of people see as it really extreme. Like you're going to work out twice a day, 45 minutes each, one outside, and you're just going to drink water. You're not going to drink, sugar water or coffee or whatever, and you're going to read 10 pages every day, and you're going to take a progress photo every day for 75 days straight, and you've got no cheat days, no alcohol. Like, what is going on? And then you start doing this, and halfway through, you realize, like, this is a natural state for humanity. I learned it took me 4 or 5 different iterations on diet, but I figured out really for me with the combination of the type O diet, for my blood type, and fasting, that's really hacked the matrix. It took me 4 or 5 different diets of not just trying them, but actually doing them to achieve the kind of results where I realized, like, hey, my biome and my metabolism is actually working on this, and I can get to an optimum state that, frankly, most people that aren't really on that path, they can't even relate because, like I was, so far over on the spectrum, you get used to this lower level of living and energy, but over here, like you get a sense of wellness where you start to realize, okay, you're like that statue of David where you got to take away the stone to see what's underneath. And if you eliminate all these things from your life and you start doing this, even just walking, like people think, oh, 2 workouts a day, how would you even do that? I don't even work out once. I don't even work out 3 times a week.
Hmm.
Well, it can be yoga in the morning when you wake up, and it can be a walk in the evening. A lot of people do that. Maybe they're not, fit enough, or they have an injury, or whatever it is. Lots of people in the program don't go crazy, but if you just do that level of exercise, you start to realize if you stand all day instead of sitting, you walk outside every day, do a little bit of stretching every day. This is the normal state of humanity that we're biologically designed to operate at a level. And actually over here is what's incredibly unnatural. It kind of makes me sad for I could see it. Some people never make that transition to get over here. I don't know if I sound like a prophet or a madman or a jerk right
Nope.
now. It's something that I want for everybody. And the reason I think this is so pertinent, and you and I have experienced this, the benefits of this, if you don't do this, you are vulnerable to depression, anxiety, disease, diabetes, cancer, COVID.
Yeah, I
You know,
hear
you,
you.
you can't you can't you can't talk about obesity and COVID anymore because it's called fat shaming. But I'm sorry, it's what you put in your mouth and it's what you put in your brain. And when at the beginning, when you talk about me being one of the most optimistic people that I appreciate that so much. But it's hard at the same time because that's a public persona that I put out there because that's an alter ego that I cultivate. And I don't know if I'm Clark Kent cultivating Superman or if I'm Superman cultivating Clark Kent. That's a bit of an existential question, whether we're actually the superhero or the alter ego. But I do this to fight off the darkness, my friend, so that
Well,
I'm
and I
not.
mean, well, the thing is,
I'm not.
Dan, I've known you a long time, and we've had some darker conversations. You've sat in my chair, and it's been,
Right.
dude, this is what's going on. But if you go to that 80/20 rule, you're less than 20% negative. I mean, everybody has their shit they got to deal with, but you are open with it. Maybe it's just with me. I don't know. Maybe it's just natural conversation for
No,
us. But
sure.
you
Too
talk
much.
about the 80/20, but I agree 100%. I agree 100% on that. I mean, they're not marketing. They're marketing bullshit right now. Not that COVID's bullshit, but they're marketing fast food, shit food, all the stuff. They're not marketing health at all. People fat shaming, I'll call bullshit on fat shaming because I was fat. I was a fat tub of shit, and I was 307 pounds at my fattest. And my doctor, when I was
Yeah.
22, gave me and he comes in for haircuts. And I thanked him about a year ago. I said, "You realize that I probably would have had a heart attack if I hadn't met you?" Because he told me I'd have a heart attack before I was 30. So is that fat shaming? No. You eat a lot of shit. You were eating chips and dip every night. This isn't good for you. I remember going to, I shared this on a podcast before.
It's a choice.
I remember going to my personal trainer, proud as hell, because again, chips and dip were my thing. And then I was allowed one reward a week type thing on the strict diet that I was on. And I came in so proud that I ate Doritos instead of potato chips. He's like, dude, that's not better at all. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's made out of corn. He goes, no. He's
Doritos.
fuck. He just had his hand on his forehead. He's like,
It's health
listen,
food.
that's not better. But you're right. When you and I and people like us, and I'll say people like us because there's a separation between people like us and people that bitch and complain about people like us. And I don't have a problem saying that. When we're healthy and we're at the gym and we're doing what we can to make ourselves better, I don't want to be an old, decrepit dad. And I am old for a guy who just started having kids. I want to be that guy that's running with my kid, lifting up stuff, doing all the stuff that I can do to the best of my ability for a very long time. I want to be alive longer, as long as I can be. When I see somebody bitching
Yeah,
about masks and
sorry, we
COVID,
got some. Is there a way your connection? I don't know if it's just me, but it seems to be dropping out, Quentin, in and out a little bit.
we're recording pretty steadily, so it might just be on your end, but
Okay,
it's working on my end. Um, when I talk
I've been a
about
dad at 23. I've been a dad at 45, and I'm feeling just as good or better. I think, from my memory, anyways, of where I am at right now. And furthermore, because I've cultivated all this physical activity, I just want to get outside. I want to get on the bike. I want to walk. I want to walk the dogs. I want to walk with Ivanka. I want to spend time outside, and I don't mind going to the playground. And I've had a big shift too, where before that was always taking away time from my mission, which was to be the provider, right?
yeah,
But it actually had a real negative effect on my first marriage, as you know.
hmm
Um, and and now I have the perspective to say, like, this is the most important part of my day. Like, this is the checkbox that most needs to be checked off in a day is getting outside, getting in nature, seeing my daughter, spending time with her, and I see you doing that. I see you as a guy too that has the right priorities, and I think when you start out your day at 4 a.m. at the
Hmm.
gym, what is that saying to the universe? You're saying I care enough to roll out of bed, and who doesn't want to, stay in bed till 7 or 8 in the morning? I mean, it's great, but you've chosen to get out. You've chosen to put your personal health first, and like saying that there's no time. How could they see your feed, see you at the gym at 4 a.m. in the morning, and people say, well, there's no time. Well, you can choose anything above that 4 hours of television that the average American watches, and I love
Hmm.
Netflix too.
Yep. Yeah.
But
I think that myself, w- mine is it's two things. One, I've adapted to being that way, and I've been that way for years, as far as getting up in the morning and doing my workouts. Two, I want to do that while my family's asleep because I don't want to take time away from my family to be at the gym. Because again, I am busy and I'm busy, 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 and I go from 4 in the morning till sometimes 8 at night, like 7, 8 at night, working, whether it's behind the chair or whether it's showing homes or whatever it is, or recording podcasts. And I'm consistently going, but Kelsey talked to me about this about a week ago. She goes, you're going to burn out one of these days. I go, maybe. I go, I don't see it because I do get exhausted. And the first time I know that I felt exhausted was last week because every day we were sitting there waiting for another announcement from Rusin. We're like, is it coming today? Is it coming today? And that mentally caused a physical exhaustion to me, which I had never experienced because I've gone through two shutdowns and waiting every day and him not being on really got to me. It really got to me. And I felt it. And Kelsey's saying, you know what, you only sleep so many hours a day. I go, yeah, but have you seen my sleep record? Like sometimes I'll put my smartwatch on and sleep with it. Pretty much slip into a coma 5 minutes after I hit the pillow. And I get deep, 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 deep sleep. I do not wake up. And then boom, I'm up in
that's
the morning.
great.
Some people might get 8 hours of sleep or they're in bed for 8 hours, but they're tossing and turning or they're up 5 times. I don't. Like you could pretty much slap me across the head. You'd have to do it a few times before I wake up, which Kelsey thinks if someone breaks into the house, we're screwed because I'm not going to get up. I go, oh, I'll get up. Trust me. And I won't be happy about it. But I think
But part of the
what,
reason you're getting such a good sleep is because you're doing all this other stuff. And that's one major thing that I notice. Like if I'm drinking a lot of water and I'm working out twice a day and I'm staying off the booze and I'm staying off the shitty food, at some point, at 9:30 at night, I'm trying to read my 10 pages and it's lights out and I'm wide awake at 5 in the morning. But it goes
mhm,
the other way too, where stringing these things together, like people think, maybe people are listening to this and thinking like, I can never go to the gym at 3 a.m. or I can never do 2 workouts a day, or I can never give up alcohol for 75 days, or I can never do this and never do that. But you know what? It's something that you acquire over time, and it's a domino effect either way, right? Like if you have 4 or 5 beers on a Sunday night or Sunday afternoon watching the game or hanging out with the girls or whatever you're doing, yeah, that's a chain effect. Like on Monday morning, you're not liable to get up at 5 a.m. and do Wim Hof breathing, do some yoga, do some journaling, do some meditation, take a 5 minute cold shower, write your weekly planner, do a podcast.
yeah.
I mean,
But I think that what
I,
happens is
I had I had 10 things I checked off before I got here, so I feel like I'm winning rather than just coming into this cold going, "What's my life purpose?"
it even goes back to that make your bed and you've accomplished something that most people haven't accomplished before you even start your day. Make your bed.
That's one of
Now
the
you've done
things I
something.
tick off. I'm on an app called Habitica now. We've kind of evolved. I've done 75 hard, close to 300 days, and I mean, one of the things that I miss is having a little bit of flexibility. And last night I had pizza and wings with the kids. It is nice to have that communion with other folks. And like I say, it's part of our business. That socializing, you cannot replace that when you go out. and you have a couple beers and you get philosophical with somebody, that kind of relationship in sales is priceless and almost irreplaceable. You can't do that with the Zoom meeting. But one of the things I've been working on is I got on this app called Habitica, where you it's like Zelda for habits.
Nice.
And it's just great because actually my buddy formed a guild and invited me, and we just finished a boss battle. It was like we had to like hack this guy down like 1,000 points or whatever. But you get points and experience and magic and level up and armor and bragging rights and all this stuff for doing your
Really?
habits. And you lose health and you lose armor and you lose different things if you don't do it. But it's like I've got 15 daily habits, which are down to something as simple and primordial as like floss, bitch, floss,
Yeah.
because I wasn't flossing, like, and that's a big step. Like, hey, flossing isn't a big deal, but when I go back to Chad Crook 6 months later, it's kind of the difference between me having like major plaques sitting on the bottom half of my teeth and not. I mean, it's gross, but
Yeah.
it's true, and it's funny because I read something, a little post by the minimalists that I really respected what they were saying, and it was such a good read. Go into the minimalist feed. I do love those guys, but they had this fundamental argument that it wasn't the daily habits that got you there, because eventually the momentum of your habits would fail and this and that, and they had this whole argument. They said, you need the bigger why. It's all about your purpose. And they kind of left it like a cliffhanger. I feel like it was like post 1 of 3 or something, they're really great copy. But I almost felt like it disagreed because I've been thinking about getting some tattoos. You always inspire me, and I've been thinking about different ways that I could. I was thinking like, why can't I like write a bunch of self help shit all over my body so I actually be reminded like of certain
You,
things? And what I've been thinking about getting is like discipline on one wrist and gratitude on the other, because honestly, discipline and gratitude is the happiness, like the happiness formula that I've found that actually works for me. And I don't know, yes, sometimes my why gets bigger and my purpose gets bigger and everything's expanding, but we're going through a weird time with the company where we're trying to simplify, we're trying to focus, we're trying to get rid of the 80% of stuff that we do that only gets us 20% of the results. And it's hard because it's not necessarily my vision for the company. I've been kind of grieving the way I thought the company wanted to look versus the way it's actually going. But I would argue, I would posit that the doing of the daily habits actually supersedes your purpose. Because let's face it, Quentin, I don't know about you, but are you just going to the gym every day at 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning because your why is so big every day, health and your kids and faith and your wife and your mission as a man? Let's face it, not every day do we feel as men that our mission and purpose is bigger than the day before. And that's my biggest fear, is that my mission and purpose won't be bigger tomorrow than it is today. But sometimes you need those habits just to physically get you through and fight off the darkness. And those days when I wake up with a low level anxiety or depression, I don't know what to do. I'm not excited about putting my pants on. You know, uh, it's like, start checking the boxes, and your good feelings will come from that.
well, I think that and again, I've had this conversation with Kelsey, and it's the why, like, why is it that you're doing what is it that you get out of the gym? And you're right, it's not just the physical. Am I trying to get bigger? Absolutely. I mean, I'm trying to turn myself into a bit of a monster, which is fine. But I said, you know what, Kels, I'm on all day. Behind the chair, I'm on. Behind when I'm dealing with people, I'm on. When I'm on a podcast, I'm on. I go, the only time, like when she's reading, I go, that's your off time. That's your off time with the kids. That's when you're quiet. You get to sort of focus on you. I go, when I'm at the gym, I'm off. My brain is off. I'm listening to podcasts. Most people are listening to metal and stuff. I'm just listening to people talk. And it's my time that I can not have to talk, and I can just do me. That's my me time. That's my therapy. When I'm there, I am hood up, buds in, doing my thing. And I think that somewhere along the line, you and I are both we've managed to hack our own programming to the point where this is what works. This is how you function optimally. And not everybody has to understand it, but as long as it works for you, you don't have to explain it. I think that our programming from youth is very much well, this is what our parents did. This is what society is. This is what you're going to have. These are the snacks. These are the pizzas. These are the chips. These are the candies. These are the Slurpees. And it's just kind of normal because that's what everybody does. You just go to Dairy Queen, which is fine. I got nothing against Dairy Queen. It's fantastic. It's delicious. But it's these things have become habit. No different than when I look at things like McDonald's being considered essential when you're doing nothing but polluting yourself and you're eating that shit.
Oh my God.
But it's so normal that it's become almost an essential part of society. If you can somehow hack that hardwired shit that's in our system that was not bad, but it was just what was. You know that it's not optimal for you. And until you
Yeah.
learn that, you can't make the switch. I learned that and you learned that, and there's a lot of people out there that learned that. And they've made that little changes, even if it's small. Like when I hear someone coming into my chair and bitching about the masks, but I just saw them smoking a cigarette outside. Okay, you're one guy that like
I don't care if
you
you
just
die.
finished. Yeah, whatever. Go ahead. I don't care if you die. Go ahead. But no, when you got
You
people talk
deserve to
about
die, bitch. No, I'm
you
just kidding.
deserve to die. But no, when I see someone who is talking about like they understand this whole pandemic and it's like, it's just a flu, it's just this and that and everything else. Like, first of all, you don't give a shit about your health. Number one, don't lie to me and tell me that you're healthy and you're gonna make it through this shit.
Right.
You've got
Right.
more crap in your lungs than most people because you're making shitty decisions. Okay. Not against smokers. Smoke. Go ahead and smoke your brains out. But whenever I hear someone say, well, who's gonna pay for this shit? Okay, then we can go into that whole the government giving out money and stuff. But let's for a second. I'm going to talk about what was it, syrup. Who's going to pay for the syrup? I'm like, okay. First of all, who's going to pay for your lung transplant? And then we'll roll
Right.
back to syrup. Now,
Right.
I think that we take for granted the fact that we have really good healthcare, so you can really treat your body like a dumpster, and they're going to fix you. I think that's one of the problems. I love the fact that we have healthcare. There's no problem with that. But I think it's given a lot of people a free ride and a permission slip to just go to town and be shitty without any repercussions, except the fact they're going to be in a hospital for 6 months until they get out, and then they're going to go smoke another pack of cigarettes again.
It's a complicated issue, Quentin. I mean, I wanted to tell you too, I got this virtual reality headset called the Oculus. And
Mm-hmm.
much like, this, having meetings on Zoom and doing everything virtually would have seemed pretty crazy a couple years ago. I really think that virtual reality in the next 5 or 10 years is going to be something that it just comes on in a way that we can't imagine because it's so realistic. But I watched this Oculus TV. It's specifically created for VR,
Mm-hmm.
and really made me consider. I watched this thing called Inside COVID-19. It made me consider that perhaps the real nature of this thing hasn't been sold that well. It's got kind of lost in the noise because I feel like our provincial government specifically has had trouble communicating even some good news, like, hey, we're gonna give teachers a tax break on school supplies. Like,
You're
great,
right.
except what's his nuts there kind of shit the bed even talking about it. Selling a feature and benefit. Everybody was mad at him because he did such a shitty job at selling it. So in this virtual reality documentary, you're in the hospital room, you're in the home, you're driving in the vehicle of this emergency room superintendent or whatever. I'm not sure exactly what his title was, but he was in a position of responsibility and power within the United States healthcare system. Okay. And it was part, documentary. It was part documentary interview. Sorry, just dropped my AirPod here.
Yep.
It was part documentary interview, part CGI representation of COVID. So it went back to when the pandemic started, and this guy was responsible for this healthcare division to whatever degree, and he was making plans before anybody knew it was a thing. Like, this is like January 2020, February 2020, and so they're watching the news and everything. But the interesting twist in that story was COVID got into this guy's lungs. I would say he's probably 55, 60, and it had this like 3D CGI virtual reality representation where Dan Aberhart is like a tiny little particle of this guy's lungs
Uh huh.
floating around, Like, holy shit. And you can look around, you can turn around the whole thing, you can see exactly what's going on. And here's this, like, we've all seen it a million times now,
Yeah.
this actual virus floating around. You can, like, lean over and touch this inside of the wall of your lung. And
Wow.
you see this thing starting to replicate in such a real visceral way. And it showed portions of his lung that were necrotizing. I don't know if that's the word, but it's like necrosis, is like dying, turning into blood and mucus. He
Wow.
couldn't breathe. And they were reenacting all this with his family, and literally showing him like in bed in the guest house, February of 2020 with COVID. And previously to that, he had been the guy who was supposed to save us. He's physically in the hospital room with the patient. I mean, he's the doctor that you depend on. He's been reduced to like a miserable lump of flesh by this virus. He can't breathe. His lungs are turning to death, and parts of his lungs are dying. And you think about the permanent damage this is doing to some people, and just the whole infrastructure, and how bloody spoiled we are. Like, in a way, I've heard it said, and I really believe this is a rich man's disease, because I think in a lot of places they just don't have the resources to deal with this. Thank God that we have the ability to deal with this. On the other hand, I think it's gone so far in the spectrum that you and I, it's hard not to go freedom fighters some days. It's hard not to feel really depressed. It's hard not to be angry too, because I feel the strongest thing we could be doing against this disease is taking vitamin D, sunning our balls, going carnivore, and throwing in a little bit of vegetables, getting outside and walking every day. Like, as far as I'm concerned, I built my own mask on my own volition, taking personal responsibility for my health. But I also been that guy who was 38, smoked a pack a day, 30 pounds overweight, drank a lot, never did any physical activity. I couldn't relate either. So, to be fair, you know, it's hard to be vindictive about it, but I just still can't understand why none of the messaging is around taking care of yourself. But at the same time, I feel like they've done a really shitty job of selling us on why we need to take these precautions and the true nature of the disease. Because seeing this documentary, I really felt strongly, man, I learned some things I didn't really realize before. The full impact of this disease, it really got hit home to me, because I think on an average day, it's like my sister got COVID. That's been about the extent of it, and she was sick for a couple of weeks, but it really hasn't touched my life, other than I felt, certain people that are more vulnerable to the negative aspects of the lockdown actually have suffered to the point where you would have to really do a pros and cons chart to say, like, what's better here, the lockdown or suffering through trying to get through on the virus, which is a complete unknown. But you're almost
Well,
willing to take that risk, right?
yeah, I mean, like myself, I got hit because I literally lost my job twice. My way of life got shattered twice, right? Um,
Right.
what I noticed that, and I take it pretty seriously. I mean, I've had enough of it. There's no doubt. Um, I'm I believe that what I do for a living on the chair side of it is not as dangerous as. And even I had a gentleman from the hospital, and I said, "Listen, I'll give you $100." And I was at the gym. I said, "I'll give you $100. I'll go grab cash right now if you can explain to me how." I said, "This is a safety thing at this point, right?" He goes, "Yes, we're trying to limit the spread." I go, "Okay. If you can explain to me how sitting in a dentist chair with my mouth open in someone's face is safer than two people with a mask on, where I'm not really going in front of you at all, I'll give you $100."
Mm.
He's like, you got me." He goes, "Actually," he goes, "No, what you're doing isn't any more dangerous than anything else." I go, "So why did we get shut down?" He said, I can't answer that question. I don't know." He goes, "Because it didn't get shut down in every province." So yeah, I took it a little personally, but I also have a family to think about, and I I adhered to what had to be done. Now, problem that I have is, let's say they do another lockdown. Well, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting the same result, or expecting a different result. And it did not work the first two times. So what's the answer?
Right.
And I think that on
Well,
their
there's
end,
other places in the world that are open. And you look over there, like Florida, Texas,
I
India.
know. I know. Like
It's
there,
like, what is going on here?
I don't think there's an answer. I don't think there is. I think that there's been a bit of a herd immunity, and that's where our variant comes from because now it has something to fight against, so it's changing. Um, will we get through this? Most of us will. Do you want to be the person that says to hell with it and gets really irresponsible when we're at the end? We got the virus, the vaccine's coming out. We're the light is there at the end of the tunnel. We're just not seeing it. It is there. And do you want to be, there's an old saying that says you don't want to be the soldier that dies on the last day of the war. Like, do you really want
Mm,
to go out there and screw yourself when we're almost there? Probably not.
mm.
But no, I think that I believe that the healthiest people that I know are the most concerned about this. And this is just stats from the chair. There's no data that really can back this up. But I think that the people that I know, this is totally there's no real data, but this is what I see in the chair. The people that I know that really take care of themselves, the people that I know that really take care of their bodies, take care of their health, seem to be the most concerned about this and are doing everything they can. The people that aren't seem to think this is just a flu. So maybe people just don't understand. I don't know. It's been over a year. We should be quite educated in it by now. Or are they digging their heads in the sand and saying
I
this
think
is bullshit and this isn't real?
one of the more interesting aspects of this whole pandemic has just been everybody's response. And I know
Yep.
people that are like way over on the lockdown lover and way over on the freedom fighter. And there's like really rational people that have gone down rabbit holes of conspiracy theories that are just so elaborate. If human beings had the resources to pull that off, I'd be really impressed. And not that there isn't some manipulation, and there's a small chance that the vaccine is overall going to reduce, worldwide fertility because Bill Gates wants it that way. But
Maybe. Maybe.
I,
Would I be?
I don't
Am I a
know.
bad
I mean,
person because I? Am I a bad person because I own stocks in this company now?
yeah, I know. It's like the thing is, I will say, I feel again like so much of it is driven by money, and the thing that really drives me crazy, it's literally like whether it's obesity or the pandemic, because there's so much money involved in giving you a pill or a vaccine for it. It's like, no, don't worry about it. Just stay home, order in, and the government will take care of you. That's a lot of the narrative where I think for governments, it's been a bit of a boon because if you're in that position of power, the more that people want you and need you, the better. The less people want you and need you, that's a real threat to your existence. So I think a lot of people have gotten carried away with that power and that feeling of being needed when really some of the messaging should be like, this is on you. This is on you. Not only to like take proper precautions like a fully formed adult, which we should all be given the choice. And it doesn't take that much. Like if it I don't know why. The mental part of this I think is many many times the actual physical impact, because you know what, putting a mask on and using antibacterial and washing your hands or whatever, of course for a farm boy that's we're
Yeah.
used to just like it's a point of pride of you're like
That's what genes are for.
washing your hands 10 times a day is not. Yeah, we never grew up, we grew up eating like carrots out of the garden and like, I mean,
Yeah.
playing in the
And,
shit. I don't We
and
just
we're
never
still
got that
alive.
like, oh, wash your hands with soap for 20 days, like it's almost
Yeah.
embarrassing. But at the same time, we could all, it's a new courtesy, it's a new respect, we could all be doing it. But I think there's an underlying feeling of trepidation, or like somehow the foundation of our society has shifted so much when we didn't we didn't even maybe know or recognize before on the spectrum exactly what a like kind of a social beast we are until it was taken away. And now you watch like a concert on YouTube, or you go to the barber, or shake hands, kiss babies a little bit in person, you're like, oh my god, this is a really big deal in my life that I didn't know before until it was taken away. And maybe that's the gift, maybe that's the real. I think Quentin, that could be the gift, is that we now recognize how valuable it is, how social creatures we really are, and nothing's ever going to change that, and we're going to need that as part of our fabric of who we are as human beings forevermore. And we should take even more gratitude from it. We should take have even more efforts to endeavor to come together as human beings in a way that's been programmed into us for eons. That's who we are.
Well, I think that we're social creatures, and I think we've been taking that for granted for a very long time. We really do. And one example of that was 2 weeks ago. It was Bo's sixth birthday. Last year, we couldn't do anything for either kid. This year, you could have a few people outside, and thanks to a friend who has these giant bouncy houses, I got to borrow one of these things. And this thing is huge. I mean, it was taller than the house. It was awesome.
You seen that?
And
It's awesome.
and well, thing is, we had two kids in the backyard, and our two kids. And as great as it was to see the kids having fun, and it was great because I believe that kids are hurting the most because they're learning how to socialize right now, and they're really being it's being stubbed down as far as how they have their social interactions. As great as it was to see the kids having fun, it was almost sobering and sad when I looked at the kids and I'm like, I haven't seen them smile like this in a year. They haven't had fun in a year. That was the sad, sad reality of that weekend. I was like, fuck, they're missing out in a lot. Like, and
Yeah.
when they do finally get a chance to play with somebody, it is a big, big deal. And I think we're gonna appreciate the time that we spend with people, whether it's with your kids, whether it's with another kid that your kid's playing with, whether it's the fact that you can socialize professionally. I think that every interaction we're having with people now is going to mean a lot more than it did before because we're going to be a lot pickier as to who we spend our time with and how we spend our time with them, which is not, there's nothing
I
wrong with
agree.
that. But I think,
In
yeah,
our
we've just
business
got,
we can see it, right? Like we're going to have the spectrum, the I've been saying spectrum a lot. I don't know, it's my word of the day,
yeah,
but the pantheon of different activities that we can do in our business to reach our customers. I mean, before it was just a given that we would have an in-person meeting, which is great. Like really
yeah,
business can't move ahead until we have an in-person meeting. It would be presumptuous or arrogant of me to assume that we could do business just by text or a phone without ever having met me or gotten together to establish that relationship. And again, back to the social media where you try and get people to know and like you and trust you so they can do business with you or grease the wheels of doing business through social media. That's what it's for. You were doing it on Sunday with your real estate business, right? But
yeah.
now everything's shifted to where it's like a lot of these other mediums I think are more acceptable. Like we're opening up Alberta with our company. We're taking on
Mhm.
Alberta for the first time. We've just been distributing in Saskatchewan, Manitoba for the last 5 years. Well, going out there and making that initial contact is more important than ever. But then I think after that, a lot of the business, like in between, can be facilitated in a different way. Like there's not as much expectations to physically get out there. And you know what? In a lot of ways, it's great. Less environmental impact, which is a thing. Like I don't have to be out staying in hotels. I don't have to be away from home. Tremendous amount of energy and time and effort goes into like physically traveling out there. Of course, you're eating and drinking like shit,
Yep.
as we talked about. That's all part of it. You know, you got to kind of sacrifice your you got to sacrifice your body to craft beer and nachos, which is a
Yeah.
really tough thing to do. But um, you know, now I can see where it's kind of shifted, and it's like if I'm out there in person, I feel like, hey, this meeting meant a lot to me because I had to physically break the law to come here and I have to self isolate for 14 days when I go back
Yeah.
to Manitoba. So
Yeah.
it means a lot that I'm here right now. But I'm really glad for like we've talked about all the negative things, but let's just stop for a minute too and think about some of the positive things. So I'll just take a stab at this. One is yeah, we have facilitated new ways of doing business that, like, I can go to a seminar, I can have a customer meeting, I can do things I never dreamed of that I absolutely insisted I had to do in person before. I can do it over Zoom, and I can do it 8 times a day. I hardly have time to pee. Some days
Yep.
it's a lot, but everybody's really good. A colleague of mine pointed out. Everybody says they're so exhausted in the Zoom age. Well, that's because you're actually working hard, bitch. You're not just 2 or 3 meetings a day and driving the rest of the time. You're actually having like 8 meetings in a row, and it is draining because it's intense. And you're talking to this person like we're doing business with guys from Finland. which is a really cool story, by the way. It should get to what we actually do, but we're doing some business with guys from Finland. Never met them. We were going to go over there. That would have been expected. But in the pandemic, it's like, I'm not even thinking about when I'm going to Finland. So, go to a seminar, two days of like really intensive learning and interacting and stuff. But when you shut that off, you're missing some of that networking that you could never replace, like goes on in the evening, getting to know people and stuff. But at the same time, going back to the 80-20 rule, you're probably getting 20% of the content you're actually taking makes 80% of the difference you're still getting. And when you turn it off, you can go play with your kids. You can go to another thing and you're at home. But there's something else too. I think there's the gratitude of going back to these social interactions that, has taught us a lot. But also, what are we going to learn? We don't know yet. But here's how I see business and life in general. I have to coach myself because sometimes I get really angry about things not going my way and having everything the way exactly I want them. But
Mm-hmm.
it's like, you don't know that the biggest challenge that you've had won't turn into the greatest thing that makes everything change after that. And I think COVID really could be like that, because how much better is it going to make us in so many areas? And then conversely, the biggest opportunities that you think are going to be wonderful and just like shoot you into outer space in terms of all your goals and the love of your life or the dream job or getting that car or whatever, whatever is a big deal. It just turns out it's actually it never even came to be, or wasn't that great, or you're tired of it after 3 days and now you got to pay for it. I mean, it's the challenges that make us who we are, and we've survived this relatively good, relatively speaking. And I think humanity's going to, like, our evolution has been accelerated. And this is maybe going somewhere else, Quentin, but I honestly think, I'm a big futurist guy. It's part of my strength finders. I'm always looking to
Mm-hmm.
the future, and I think that's what I love about being an entrepreneur too. But we're heading towards something we can't even imagine. Like, the way technology is accelerating, you're going to have this convergence of technologies that all come together in a way like, I don't know if in 20, 30, 50, 100 years, I, I don't think we're going to be human. I don't think we'll be the same. I think we're going to be like Cyborg. We'll be like Jean-Claude Van Damme in that Cyborg movie, which would be pretty cool.
That would be
I
pretty
don't know.
cool. I think that, well, you got to look at it this way. Technology has evolved more in the last 20 years than in the past 1,000. Like,
Right.
that's accelerated
Oh,
growth.
exponentially.
I
Well,
think that we are becoming far more efficient than we've ever been, thanks to COVID. We had to figure out a way to be very efficient with our work. I think that these scars that we've got, and there's going to be some deep scars that are going to happen to a lot of people because of this, are going to make us better, because we're going to have to figure out a way to fight through some shit that we never would have had to 5 years ago or 2 years ago. Suddenly you've got challenges in front of you. And I welcome challenges. I welcome something that's going to, like, hit me down as many times as you want. I'm coming back up, you know, and you better pray that I'm not coming after you, because I will make sure that I come after you. Like, if you're the one that hit me down, I'm going to come after you, and I'm going to surpass everything that you said that I shouldn't be doing. I think that this is the one time when we've seen society get weaker and weaker and weaker as far as challenges. We've had a pretty pillowy life for the last 10 years for sure. That pillow's been ripped off, and your ass is on the concrete. Now what do you do? There's a whole generation that's never had a lot of challenge, and it's been fairly simple. Now you got to evolve. This might be one of
well,
those,
it's never going back.
no,
You know
but
what I
this
mean?
might be one of those evolutionary kicks in the ass that we needed. We needed it. I mean, nobody needed
Mm-hmm.
COVID, but I think we all needed to be hardened up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. I think that when I look at different groups, generations, and that, I mean, I've worked hard since I was 12. I've always had a job. When I see somebody who's in their 20s that's never had a job, I'm like, how the hell do you not have a job yet? Like, what's going on? I do think that people are going to be more creative as far as content, like you are, as far as their businesses, starting businesses, not relying on a paycheck from people, because that business might go under and now you're going down with the ship. I think that we're gonna have a whole new generation of entrepreneurs who are gonna figure out a way to make a life without relying on somebody else. And I hate to use the term making a living, because a living is just, it's a dollar amount. I think you make a life out of whatever it is you're doing. I've made a life out of barbering, and I'm going to make life out of real estate. And I think that the living part of it, whatever, it's a living, a paycheck's a paycheck. But if you can make your life something that's better than you thought it was going to be, or better than it could have been, I think you're on top. And I think that these challenges
Yeah.
are something that's going to really help people. But I think that, looking at what you do, the reinvention or the innovation that you provide is something that's going to help people that are in your industry kind of look at how they've been doing it for the last two generations or three generations, and take a step back and say maybe this is a better way. So I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
evolution
Let
that's
me
going to
talk
happen.
about that a little bit. We were going to get to that at the beginning, but
Yeah,
it's
no,
off.
let's get at it.
It is like a visit to the barber shop, of which I thought,
Totally.
we should do that. We should get into your barber bunker there, and I'd love to get my beard trimmed. But I don't know if we could do like a podcast while you trim my beard into the Leonidas, because I would still want to be like, I still watch 300
I'm,
now
you
and
know
then.
what,
It's
I'm a
like,
pretty,
damn.
I he has a great beard. There's no doubt. That was an epic beard,
Yeah,
and you could
and I
pull
want
it
to get
off.
that rep too. But yeah, we are fortunate enough. Really, I've been kind of coming full circle to who I am and what I do. And I've even thought a lot about developing even further some of this alter ego that I would consider my more public persona, which I think I was going to call like ShamWow Dan or something, if I was to
Nice.
kind of call it a superpower. But really, I'm a salesperson, and I've been fortunate enough to pick up on certain things in my career that I'm able to double down on, and I get really good at being the specialist. And so I started out my career as a John Deere salesman for sprayers, just a sprayer
Hmm.
division. And that was a really unique opportunity, Quentin, because back in the day, farmers, this is like the year 2000 or so, most guys were getting their fields custom sprayed by somebody who had a high clearance sprayer. It wasn't ubiquitous that farmers would have it. And when I got into the business, it was largely to sell custom to custom makers. But by the time I got out in 2013, really every farmer had one. So I was there through a huge growth portion of the industry, from the point when it was like a really exclusive thing to have a sprayer to where every farmer had one on their yard. And so I didn't really realize it, but the sales portion of it really got me socialized. It helped me with my confidence. I started out at a point where I didn't really have the confidence to go into a yard. Like I drive around, it'd be minus 30, be driving around. I was supposed to be cold calling, and I see like a yard
Yeah.
with big bins. But there's days I didn't have the balls to pull in. I had a little self talk. I was like, you either got to go into that yard and make that call, or you know, pack up your bags and tell them you just can't do this. So of course, I doubled down and I built that confidence. And for me, it's been all that way along, where I knew I had to like get across the gauntlet for certain things to become an entrepreneur. And I've had to go across all those thresholds. So for anybody who like sees me rapping on top of a boardroom table, singing about, fertilizer and stuff like that, and I've had like young girls on Instagram or something posting like, "Is this real life? Like, there's an old, middle-aged white guy dancing on top of a table right now." Like, I remember
You got
like
the
one of the
grapes to
comments
do it,
was like,
man. I think it's awesome.
"Is this real life? Like, could this be happening? Is this guy really doing that?" Well, that's a progression going from like having anxiety attacks, reading out loud in high school, not being able to public speak to save my life, to 4 years of Toastmasters, overcoming every single fear that I've had surrounding that, to be able to do that. And now when I do it, it's like being able to walk from being in a wheelchair before. I kind of get off on it, doing a presentation to 500 students at an egg grad, for U of S. That was a highlight. Doing some of this crazy stuff online, and I really love it. But the theme has been sales, ShamWow Dan. I did the high clearance sprayers. Then I quit cold turkey. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I had an itch. There was something missing in my life, and I got into tile drainage and water management for a couple of years. That my first foray into entrepreneurship actually failed, physically failed, but I learned a lot. Technically, I learned a lot about entrepreneurship on somebody else's dime. And then
Hmm.
there was this product that came along that we formed our company around, Aberhart AG Solutions. So my dad's a shareholder, my brother's a shareholder. A lot of what we're doing in the company is predicated on the farm business, the agronomy business, the research business, the precision ag business that my brother's doing, and doing some fascinating stuff there. But very simply, the product that we've scaled over the prairie provinces here is a mix of compost and elemental sulfur. So compost comes from the urban waste, could be organics, could be food waste, could be leaf and yard waste, whatever you can turn into compost from urban centers. Great story for agriculture. Gets blended with elemental sulfur, which is a byproduct of the oil and gas industry. And the product that's formed is a source of sulfur. And for farmers, you've got nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and sulfur. These are major nutrients that you need to grow everything. So sulfur is used for every crop every year in ever increasing amounts with the yields people are growing for various reasons. Maybe it's ppms of CO2 in the atmosphere, or we're just getting better at growing crops and breeding and stuff like that. But take your pick. But um, this is a major nutrient that's needed on every crop. And the cool thing is, with the nature of the product, it's a biological conversion, so we can put a whole bunch of it on up front, and then biological activity converts it to a form that the farmer can use. But what's really cool about the whole premise is, we as a species throw out half of the shit that we make all the time, right? Like, make something, use it, half of it gets thrown out.
Yep.
This is like a circular economy recycling play. And we've actually taken on another product just because of that. My brother was at Agritechnica before the world went to hell with COVID. He met a company from Finland called Trace Grow that these farmers 8 years ago in Finland were farming around this recycling plant for batteries, and realized, like, there's gold in them hills. There's zinc and manganese in the black mass of batteries. And zinc and manganese is something that helps our crops in so many ways, agronomically speaking, and it helps grow human beings healthy. This is, it's really interesting how the health of the soil, the health of the plants, the nutrient density of the plants all relates to our well-being. And I think we've lost a lot of that as we've sort of gone the way of, harsh synthetic chemistry. It's got us to where we are today. Like, I don't begrudge the Coke factory or fertilizer plant here in Brandon, Manitoba. It creates jobs.
Yep.
Uh, Half of the population, it'd be like a Thanos thing. If I
Yep.
said, Quentin, we got to get rid of modern harsh chemistry and the Haber-Bosch process, which is an incredibly fascinating thing. Most people don't even know what the Haber-Bosch process is, but it's the thing that keeps half
No.
the population alive. If we had to get rid of it, it'd be half the population
Right now.
gone tomorrow. And so this is a lot of what we're doing. But now I think, hey, we can move over to more natural recycled solutions where this we're getting recycled batteries put into a micronutrient foliar, put onto our crops to grow bigger, stronger crops using less resources, that makes nutrient dense food that goes into your kids' cereal that makes them grow taller. And if you think this is facetious, I mean, you can take the zinc rich soils of, say, Western US versus Eastern US, and the kids are taller on one coast than the other. I mean, this is
Really?
all connected. Yeah, absolutely. And furthermore, I don't know if you've ever heard, like, if you take a teaspoon of soil, all the millions of organisms that are in there, the complexity of life that's in the soil that we're just starting to learn about, that we've been scorching with a lot of our, like, agriculture activities. We're now starting to understand there's this complex system of nature that holds everything together in a way that we can't hardly crudely imitate using, synthetic means. It's similar to our biome. If you're eating goldfish crackers every day, you're going to live, but your biome's going to be scorched. And you might have leaky
Yeah.
gut, and the food particles are going into your bloodstream, and you've got psoriasis or diabetes or whatever, like autoimmune diseases. That's a lot of, like, they're learning more and more about how our biome affects things like autism and autoimmune diseases and
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff. And it's all connected. And we're going to get to the point where, uh, fostering the biome of ourselves and in the soil is something that we all endeavor to do. Is I never knew there was any biology in the soil when I was a young man. Like, you just put the fertilizer on, you put the spray on, plants grew. I didn't know there was anything living in the soil, and now we know biology. There's a whole ecosystem inside the soil that facilitates the exchange of nutrients between the soil and plants. There's just this crazy trade-off and exchange of value going on in the soil, and we're moving towards that in agriculture with technologies that are so exciting. And I'm excited about the recycled fertility that we're bringing to the market. My brother's working with technologies that could reduce chemical sprays up by 80%, 85%. They got drones with artificial intelligence just spraying the weeds that need to be killed. And then you can sell that crop for a premium to Raquette Plant in Portage la Prairie that's owned by Bill Gates.
Oh boy.
He's a big proponent of plant protein, right? But you get a premium for not spraying a bunch of harsh chemicals onto crops. So yeah, farming, it's an interesting thing because you said at the beginning, the paradigm that's out there in farming, and it's hard to get people to change, and it's hard to imagine the changes, but the world is so different now. Like I open up the Western Producer, and the first 6 pages are about regenerative ag and recycling this and environment like that. It's Jim Pattison, who owns 95% of the John Deere dealers now in Canada, and he's billionaire. He said it. He said, it's the environment, the environment, the environment, and if we're not doing business in an environmentally sustainable governance kind of way, I don't, I think you're going to get squeezed out. And there's a big danger for us in agriculture. We don't do this because look at what's happened to dirty oil. And like
Yeah.
they are the dirty bastards of society that just happen to have worked so hard out there, sacrificed so much. And frankly, those folks that go to work on the oil field, God bless them, because they don't tend to come back like on the self improvement track. I don't feel
No.
like their family lives have been like they sacrificed a lot. It's like going to war,
Yeah.
but that's so your house could be heated. And
Yep.
I know we're going in the direction of renewable energy and everything, but it's like whether it's talking about the foundational systems that keep us alive in agriculture, or the foundational systems that give us the energy for us to afford the luxury to start off on a Monday morning having a 2 hour conversation over the internet on whatever we want. It takes fossil fuel to do it. This computer's made of it. This microphone's made of it. The thing that's powering the internet comes from some sort of energy, and I think we need to recognize those foundations, but also like the progress that's being made. And I think like in our business and many others, people just have no idea how much better things have got. Like we talked about COVID and the things, our gripes about it and stuff like that. But when it comes to disease, when it comes to war, when it comes to famine, you would have woken up 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. Any one of those things could have been like coming down on you. Somebody could have
Yep.
come into your village, killed your horse, set your thing on fire, whatever. You're living in a yurt, you know,
Yeah.
killed your family, took your shit, and left you for dead. Uh, Disease comes into your village. Half of yous are wiped out, but you don't even know what it is. It's like a magical thing or that. And I shouldn't have drank from this certain river, or threw a stone at the crow or whatever. It's all magic. We didn't even know. Like people in the early pandemics were walking around smelling flowers. They didn't even know it was a germ, right? War, famine, disease, crime, women's rights, whatever metric you want to pick, the world has gotten so much better. And I kind of see our business the same way. It's like one day we're going to look back and we're going to go like, Dad, you used to spray chemicals on the entire crop that we made into bread or cereal. Yeah. We used synthetic fertilizer that took tremendous amount of energy and, scorched the biology in the soil. Yes, honey, we did. Now we've progressed. We don't throw things out like we used to. We understand our biomes better. Where it's common sense. It's not some kind of left wing fantasy. It's common sense, man. Like we're using shit that we threw out to grow more crops. Like this is inevitable.
Well, and I think that
Anyways, that's my
you look
pitch.
back at
How much do
how
you
our
want?
well, no, but you know what, it goes back to even like our grandparents, how they used to farm, and I think that I might be wrong. Tell me I'm wrong if I'm going off on the wrong path here, but there was a time when you didn't waste anything. Whatever came out, if you didn't use it, you put it back in, and that helped. Help the soil, help everything grow a little bit better. I mean, my grandmother used to keep all of her eggshells. Don't know why. She kept all of her eggshells and then she crushed them and then she put them all over her tomatoes. I don't
Mm-hmm.
understand why she did that, but there is a chemical now that you buy that does exactly the same thing that those eggshells used to do. Like they
Right.
just didn't waste. They used what they had that worked back in the day. And I think that what you're doing is you're putting back in what trying to put back in what you've taken out and make it better without having to add the extra chemicals to it. And some people are blown away by
The
the
hard
fact
part is
that
like these chemicals are so cheap and they're so effective. It's hard for us to come full circle. But I was thinking about that as we're talking. When I was young, we just interviewed my dad on the podcast, and he was saying like the reason they used to have a lot of mixed stuff on the farm was literally because that's what hit your kitchen table. Like you just
yeah,
didn't have cows and chickens and stuff because you loved it, but it's like the grain farm wasn't prosperous enough or large enough to really make a living. You had to have some off farm hustle, which is crazy looking back on it now, because I
yep,
mean 50 or 100 grand doesn't go very far on the farm of $6 million
mm-mm.
of revenue. Well, they were we were eating a lot of the stuff that we grew on the farm, but I could see too, we started in our diets and we started um, with how we use things, going from using that cleaning rag a million times over and never throwing it out, now till we got Swiffer, which you throw it out every time. And we went,
Uh-huh.
started in our diets, you know not really knowing potentially the damage that something like eating craft dinner every day would do to your body, right? And
We're
now
very
I see our
wasteful.
kids are growing up with it. It's very difficult to keep our children off it. But I think we as like adults have recognized, like, man, the difference between eating whole foods, and it's the same with the soil, treating like, and maybe I don't get the same kind of results. Like you don't get fattened up the same way. It's not as convenient. Like it's a lot easier. It doesn't taste the same until you get off it. But if we let these natural solutions start working, it's a whole different quality. And I wish that farmers could experience, some of the benefits with the soil and the health of their crops in the same way that I feel like I've experienced um, wellness, true wellness
Well,
with
when you
diet, because then it wouldn't just be yield as a metric, which is all we're using right now.
no, but if you look at the way, if and it's a good point you make with the everything being processed, and even you look at the chemicals and that, like with the soil, with everything being its own
Huge.
biome. When I had lost the weight and I was on a very strict regimen, I was allowed, like I said, one reward, and it was usually something really shitty for me. And I remember my trainer saying, "Now watch out when you eat what you're going to eat, and you could have as much as you wanted, one sitting. When you eat something that's not really good for you, your body will not know what to do with it." And he was right. If you're eating fruit, vegetable, meats for 10 days at a time, and then you eat one
So true.
pizza or whatever, your body has no idea, and boom, it's gone. Like within a couple hours, you're hitting the head, and it just blasts through you. And I think that
It's a little scary.
it's a little scary, but I mean, look at how much processed shit we're using, and all the stuff we're eating, and all the waste, absolute waste. It has
Oh,
to go through our bodies to become waste instantly. It's not being absorbed. No different than these, the chemical waste that we're looking at in our crops. If you're putting the natural stuff in, it's all going to get utilized. It's going to get utilized. It's going to get used. It's going to feed the crops. It's going to be much better for it. It's actually going to be more efficient versus dump this on for a quick fix. Where does it go? So,
I
no,
got
I
an
think that
interesting point around this. Are you familiar at all with the Enneagram? Have you
not at
heard of
all.
that?
I can't spell that.
It's ENNEAGRAM.
Okay, okay.
It's an Enneagram. It's actually a Christian-based personality thing. It's kind of like DISC, but it's got ancient origins, and it just means like a nine-pointed drawing. Which, I mean, if I had a tattoo of it, you'd be like, "What are you, a Satanist or something?" But it's actually Christian-based personality test. So on the Enneagram, I'm a 7, which is called the enthusiast, which this personality system talks a lot about who you are as a healthy 7 on the Enneagram versus average 7 versus uh, unhealthy. And so when I'm a healthy 7, I'm I'm enthusiastic, of course. I'm effervescent. I love new experiences. I'm very extroverted and outgoing and positive and optimistic, like you say, like you describe me. Um, you know, I'm giving. I'm smart. I'm rich. No, just kidding. I'm getting carried away here, but um,
Yeah, the best version of
and then
yourself.
you have your average. Yeah,
Yeah,
but it's very, your specific personality has good qualities when you're going well. Well, then it talks about the 7 as average or lower, and it actually describes like going all down your pantheon of behavior to the point where it's like you basically go out of existence and pick your poison. Like for every number, there's a different way that you go evil, you go dark. Mine is my deadly sin is a 7 on the Enneagram, is actually gluttony. And I can
Mm,
see this in my life too, where when I start getting depressed or anxious, or I'm not in a good place, or I'm heartbroken, I'm lonely, or whatever the thing is, I trend towards consumption. But not just consumption, it's like uh, unrewarded consumption, because it doesn't matter how much I take in, I just I feel
mm,
terrible. So I can drink myself into a stupor, I can eat shitty food, I can spend money on things I don't need. My deadly sin is gluttony. So, and I actually find that, like, it doesn't matter what I consume, I can become a consumption machine, whether it's spending money or shitty food or alcohol or other vices, right? But I actually, there's no hope at the end of the rainbow. There's no gold at the end of the rainbow for me on any of that. And I've actually found that, like, a really healthy 7 I've started to recognize and I've read about and I've experienced in my life is when I do less of those things, when I just eat whole foods, when I fast, when I meditate, when I sleep, when I drink water, when I exercise, right? When I do my budget every morning, I actually get a different sense of reward than consumption. And for different folks with different enneagrams, it'll be a different thing they do when they trend towards that. But I've found it's incredible. So to your point, I've had periods where I ate so clean and my biome was so functional, I was feeling so good that when I try to treat myself a little bit, and this
yeah,
isn't just me, this is other people that have been in the program with me that, kind of on the same thing. You literally will get sick to the point where
yep,
you will throw up what you ingested, whether it's alcohol or processed food or whatever. It's like when I go back now, like I haven't had a cigarette for since January 1st of 2020.
mm,
And if I went to have a cigarette right now, I would taste all those 2,000 chemicals and my body would reject it and say, "What in the heck are you doing?" It's kind of like that. And then you realize I was so deadened over here that you pour in the consumption, but I was so deadened, I couldn't even feel, I didn't even know that my standard of living for myself was so low that I could pour that shit on. And I was feeling so shitty. You couldn't go any lower. But when you're up here, you're like, I'm really paying the price to eat this chicken McNugget right now.
well, the thing is, we get very used to living at a level 2. It's like, and
This is
I
it.
mentioned this before, we
This
were
is it.
talking to somebody else, but it's like driving with your check engine light on. How long are you gonna ignore that light? I mean, it's running, you're getting to work, but you're gonna have trouble getting up the getting up the First Street Hill. Like you might be
Right.
running, you're not optimal, and until you get that thing fixed, you don't realize how bad it was. You don't realize how shitty your car was until you fix it, because you didn't even know what the problem was, because the check engine light was on. You didn't even bother taking it in. You ignored it. And we do that with our bodies. We ignore it. We're still good. I'm still getting up in the morning. I'm still eating. I'm still working. I'm still fine. But what happens when you're actually doing it well? What happens when you put some premium fuel in? What happens when you give an oil change? What happens when you change that transmission? A lot, a lot. And I think that we live in a society where it's okay to be shitty. It's weird to be on top, and you can't tell anybody that they're doing
It's
something wrong.
condoned. It's
Well, absolutely.
encouraged.
Like if I saw you smoking, I'd be like, dude, what are you doing? But if you saw somebody eating a burger, you're not gonna say, dude, what are you doing? There's a double standard in how people react to people treating their bodies like shit. But I think that right now is the first time that I can remember in a long time that we're actually looking at our health the right way. We're thinking we need to make our bodies as optimal as possible in order to get through the pandemic that's happening. I mean, it's not going to cure you, but there's a better chance you're going to survive this if you're running right. So I think that
The
I'm
number
optimistic in the.
one reason people aren't going to work globally, the number one reason is mental health.
Oh yeah,
And if you think that your mental health isn't connected to your level of exercise and sleep and the amount of water that you drink, and whether you take a little bit of time out from a day and journal or meditate or um, all these healthy things, like, looking back on it, those things are literally connected. And like you said at the beginning, me being optimistic. Well, hey man, I gotta be this way. This is survival. I've had to build these, healthy infrastructure in my life so I don't go right off the rails. And anybody who knows me knows, like you talked about F1, I've been studying that sport lately. I've been really getting into that because it's so many parallels in business. There's so many cool racing
Yep.
parallels to business, but it's so true. Like those guys, like you study Lewis Hamilton. He's just such a great all around performer, athlete, driver. He physically has to be in the zone and has to do things that keep him at an optimum level of performance to survive. And I think that's really what I love about entrepreneurship, because if I didn't do those things, I wouldn't be able to get through my periods of depression or anxiety, like are bound to be happening, because of the intensity of the emotional highs and lows in entrepreneurship. Like I wouldn't be able to show up in such a way that I'd be highly productive. I'd just be, often found with this job, there can be periods of time when you're out socializing, like you're drinking every night. And I just
Yep.
got used to being at 60 or 70%. But now that's not good enough because I have a different level to compare to.
Well, and I think that right now we're in a time where we all have, because the world's slowed down quite a bit. We finally have a chance to look at ourselves and maybe take that time to make those changes and make our lives a little bit
That's
better.
part of the
I
gift,
think that
maybe.
we've been very busy for a long time, and this might be that one chance that we have to make positive improvements and just tweak something. Maybe take up reading, maybe take up knitting, maybe take up blacksmithing. Man, I used to blacksmith back in the day. I used to bang out knives.
That's pretty cool.
Maybe work on that bike. Maybe work on, just take the time. And you're right. Focus on your mental health. Do something that brings you some joy in a world where it's work and then shit on the news. Find something, whatever it is, whether it's making your body better, maybe it's working on something, maybe it's a pet project. But I think that now's the time. Happiness and joy are two different things. And I think that joy is something that we should be striving for, because happiness is a reaction to something. I think joy is something that you feel when it's moving forward. And I think that right now you've got that. I see that. Like I can see it when I talk to you. You live in you have that joy that's rare. And although lots of people say they're happy, that's because they're reacting to something that's happened. You strive for joy, and that's what I really enjoy about you. You've got that.
Appreciate that.
Call it optimism if you want, but the hundreds of people that come through my chair in a week, in a month. There are certain personalities that really stand out as far as being, man, this guy, you know what? Fuck, knock that guy down 20 times. He's coming back swinging. And you're that guy. You're that guy, man. It's always a real treat to talk to you, man. Like it's awesome. I think you should. How you see yourself is one thing, but I think how the world sees you, or how I see you anyway, is someone who has figured out a way. It took some time to find that balance to experience actual joy. So good on you, man. I think you can inspire a lot of people to do exactly what you're doing just by being you. You don't even have to preach it. Your aura
Well,
is
I
that of
appreciate
someone who
that,
just
man.
brings that calmness to people, which is cool and rare.
Hey, that means a lot, and I really appreciate the opportunity that I had to sit in your chair. And for me, it's a lot like therapy. I don't think there's any better relationship out there between a man and his barber, because we don't always take that opportunity to book ourselves in for some counseling like we should. I talked to the president of Corteva on Friday, like I said, and we were talking about mental health, just purely under the auspices like, hey, he's managing 600 employees. How do you deal with that? That being the number one thing that prevents people from performing, prevents people from showing up at their best or showing up at all. And he said, yeah, for years and years and years, I've been going to counseling, and that's something I've been thinking about too. Um, that has a lot of value, just being able to share and talk with somebody, especially somebody who knows you and supports you. And I don't always see myself the way that I guess maybe it gets presented to the world, and it always is encouraging for me. I'm a words of affirmation and touch guy on love languages. You can reserve the touch for your wife and other folks that are close to you, like, but just fist bump or pat on the shoulder or whatever, maybe man hug or whatever.
Yep.
But the words of affirmation are mean a lot to me, and it's really cool we have the relationship that we do. And I was really looking forward to coming on your podcast and just shooting the shit like we did. And I don't know, have no idea what it's going to sound like to somebody else when you
You know what?
ranting,
I think
but
it's gonna be good.
fun.
I think that you know what it was great. But it was a lot like what we talk about in the chair. But you know
Yeah.
what? It's this is why I do this. This is why like people have asked me why did you start a podcast? I go I don't know. Why do you go fishing? It's just something I dig this part of my life. I miss this part of my life when we're shut down. Um, and you're right. I think it's therapeutic. I think that it's one of those things where I get just as much out of it as my clients do. And it doesn't feel like an interview. Like it's not. We're shooting the shit. We're talking. We just happen to peel off more time than we would normally have to talk. And usually it's 20 minutes, half an hour, and then hey, see you in a month. So no, this is cool. I think that you know you do your podcast, and it's the Growing the Future podcast, and it's definitely focused on what you do and what you offer to the world of ag, but it also has a real natural feel to it, which is really cool, which is I think why
Well, we've
this
tried to
medium
bring in some of
exists.
this other stuff too, like fitness and
Hmm.
motivation and self help. And let's face it, I mean, most of us grew up where it's a badge of honor, like how many hours you could work and drive straight, in a row without,
Yep.
completely dying of exhaustion. I mean, it used to be just a badge of honor what kind of stoic, rugged individualist you are. And the fact is, mental health is running rampant in agriculture as much or more than anybody, just because of how isolated it is and because of the culture. So we tried to bring a lot of that to agriculture in a positive, be positive. Um, so that's been really good too. And one of my big whys sometimes that I try to look to in times when it gets difficult is the big place I want to get to, and it's not really working that well in the pandemic. We had one event, but it's a thing called Ag Rocks for Charity, where the fundamental premise is we have musicians in agriculture playing live at events or trade shows. Could be like Manitoba Ag Days or something like that, where you get up on the stage, you play live with the house band to raise money for the
Nice.
charity of your choice. So the first time we did it, we had 8 musicians, friends of mine, colleagues from the agriculture industry. We got up and we played live with this amazing house band. And me and my brother played, and a bunch of other musicians from agriculture. And we raised 28 grand for 9 different charities. And
Nice.
so somewhere here, I've had the vision that this could be something that's national or international or global. It's just if we could build the infrastructure to give people the tools to do this in their own community in agriculture and raise money. So you start to think about something like that. If we could sell that to the masses, that's something that could have like hundreds of people or thousands of people involved, raising money for hundreds of charities, millions of dollars. And it's a funny thing when you sit down to write your obituary. I did this for a productivity exercise the other day. So much of what we work on in a day, you're working on it as though it's important. But when you write out your obituary, it very quickly makes clear what your priorities should be, and it has nothing to do probably with what you're doing at your job every day, because it's just not that cool of a story for ex-wives to be listening to. I mean, let's entertain them at least. So focus on
Yeah.
what's going to be in your obituary is my advice.
Yeah. No one's going to remember you for the hours you put in at work. They're going to remember you for the time
No.
you spent with your family and your loved ones, and how you positively touched other people. I mean, yeah, I've been to
Influence.
many funeral, and it's not too often that I hear about work. You're right. I
No.
mean, we need to work. There's no doubt, but I think that we also need to focus on who you are, not where your paycheck comes from. I mean, they're both very important, but we lose ourselves if you're defined by your job. I think that's insane. I mean, one of the things that I do, and it's an exercise I've done for years behind the chair, is I will try to talk to somebody as long as I can in the chair without asking them what they do for a living, because it doesn't
Mm,
matter. And we will be talking
right.
and talking and talking and talking, and then sometimes there's like 2 or 3 haircuts. You've been in my chair a few times, and I have no idea what the hell you do for a living, but it doesn't matter. You know, if I can pull that out of you, pull out a conversation without talking about your work, and it's a hard thing to do because that's usually a natural thing. Hey, how's it going? Good. Hey, oh, day off today? Yeah. Oh, what do you do? Which is kind of the generic conversation that you have. But if you can go a long time without asking somebody what they do for work, the conversation's a lot better, and you really get to know a person, and then eventually it comes up. But no, it's I think that we need to define ourselves as being us and not be defined by your job, because your job can change, your work can change, your work can evolve. There's a lot of things that can happen. I mean, I've switched gears many times in my life. And what am I defined as? People probably define me as a barber. That's fine. I've been doing it for 22 years. It makes sense. But I think that that's just what I do. from 7 in the morning till whatever in the evening. That's just, I'm behind a chair.
But you're
I
serving
think
people and you're influencing people, and that's what your obituary is going to read: is you parlayed this relatively simple trade into something really special, where you touched a lot of people's lives, and now with your real estate and the podcast and stuff too, that's all part and parcel of who you are and what you do. So it means a lot. It means a lot to a lot of people, including me. So way to go, man.
maybe, maybe we'll see. But hey, man, you know what? I think
We
this
should
was
leave it
awesome.
there.
Yeah, no, but you know what? I think that you've had you've had a lot of things that have changed in your lives and your life, and I think that you're helping the people that feed us evolve. And I think that you're going to put a lot of you're going to fill a lot of bellies in a very positive way, and that's going to be, again, part of your legacy, as they'd say, would be the fact that you are helping us fuel ourselves better by sort of changing the mindset of how people do what they've been doing for thousands of years. So, awesome on you. I think that's it's super cool because
Appreciate that.
it's
I'm
new,
glad we
but
had
it's
this
old.
conversation Monday morning, because I'm like, wow, I'm really motivated right now.
That's awesome. But no,
All right,
that's
thanks, buddy.
thank you so much for coming on, man. I think that I'll be seeing you in the chair probably in the next couple of weeks, as I can, because I can see
Yeah,
you. I know you're going to be due soon.
yeah, man. It's out of control.
It's getting there. All right, man. Thank you so much.
Keep it
You know
real.
what? Aberhart AG Solutions and Growing the Future podcasts. Check them out if you're on the field or just curious about where your food's coming from and how people are doing it these days. Take a look at it. You can find them everywhere. All right, Dan. Thank you so much for
You
coming
can.
in, man.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Keep it
man.
real, buddy. Yeah,
Absolutely. You
bye for
too.
now.